That night, when she was seen in the window of a stranger's house, the whole town whispered. A light rain ran down the glass, reflecting the flickering candlelight. Evelyn held a dusty letter that no one was meant to see. Her heart raced, the past trembled in her hands, and the town's murmurs declared her broken. No one understood that for the first time in years, she felt needed and desired. That moment was a quiet spark that would reignite her life, though no one yet knew what secrets would be revealed along the way.
Evelyn returned to her hometown under a gray, heavy sky, the air still damp from the recent rain that had swept across the Colorado plains. The path to her old house was a mess of mud and puddles, each step sucking at her boots and leaving a trail behind, marking her slow, uncertain progress. The familiar road felt alien, twisted by neglect and years she had spent away. When she reached the house, it looked smaller than she remembered, its roof sagging in tired angles, shingles missing, windows sealed with rough boards that rattled faintly in the breeze. A faint smell of damp wood and stale dust greeted her, clinging to her clothes and hair like a tangible warning of time past and losses endured. The garden, once neat and lively, was now a tangle of weeds and overgrown grass, the remnants of what had been her sanctuary, standing as silent witnesses to years of absence and hardship. As she paused at the gate, mud-caked and trembling, the distant hum of the town's whispers brushed against her ears, a chorus of judgments and curiosity that seemed to follow her with every cautious movement. She sensed the eyes behind curtained windows, the quiet speculation of neighbors who believed they understood the story of her life, who had long decided she had fallen, forgotten, or been forgotten. Among the shadows cast by the remnants of fences and old trees, she caught a glimpse of someone watching, the briefest of presences that seemed both familiar and new, a figure that moved with the ease of someone who belonged here, yet waited for her to notice. Her chest tightened as her memories collided with the present, the laughter of her childhood, the weight of lost opportunities, the ache of years spent apart. The house itself seemed to breathe with her hesitation, creaking under the wind, groaning with age, whispering that everything she had known had changed, and yet that it still held a trace of what she had once loved. With each step toward the door, Evelyn felt the pull of the past and the stir of something unexpected, a flutter in her chest that whispered of connection, of someone who had been waiting just beyond sight, a presence that promised both challenge and solace. The mud beneath her boots squelched with each movement. The boards beneath her hands rattled and shifted. Yet she moved forward, drawn by a mixture of obligation, curiosity, and an unspoken hope that something or someone here might mend the emptiness she had carried across years and miles. Shadows danced in the corners of the windows as she approached, reflecting her own uncertainty, her hesitation, and the first tremors of a heart long guarded. A soft wind carried scents of wet earth, distant pine, and the faint tang of smoke from the town, mingling with the weight of memory and anticipation. She lingered for a moment on the threshold, feeling the full scope of what had been lost and what might yet be found. And in that pause, the world seemed suspended, waiting with her, holding its breath for the choices she would make and the connections she might reclaim. In the muted light of late afternoon, the house and its shadows seemed less like a relic of her past and more like the first stage of something uncertain and fragile, a place where the past and future could meet, and where a hint of warmth and the stirrings of desire could quietly begin to take root. The ranch spread out before Evelyn like a stubborn relic of another era, the hot Colorado wind stirring the dry dust across parched fields, carrying the scent of hay, leather, and earth baked under the late summer sun. The buildings leaned with age, their timbers warped and weathered, roofs sagging under decades of storms, fences drooping as though reluctant to hold cattle any longer. Evelyn took it all in slowly, each step along the uneven ground bringing a new creak or groan from the old boards beneath her feet. Then she saw him, Thomas Carter, standing near the corral, tall and composed, his posture unyielding yet relaxed, hands resting lightly on the railing as he surveyed the land with sharp, steady eyes that seemed to take in every detail without a word. There was a quiet authority about him, a presence that filled the space without demanding attention, a rhythm of motion in which every glance, every step, every subtle movement seemed deliberate yet effortless. Evelyn felt the pull immediately, a tethering sensation that tightened around her chest with each moment she observed him. He walked along the barn aisle, boots kicking up dust in slow arcs, and she noticed the way his shadow fell across the wooden planks, long and steady, as if marking the boundary of something sacred she had yet to cross. When he paused to lift a feed bucket or adjust a rope, the smallest gestures, the brush of his sleeve against her arm, the tilt of his head, the calm steadiness of his hands, sent a jolt through her nerves, awakening sensations she had long buried beneath years of caution and loss. Evelyn could not deny the pull of his presence, the way it invited both vigilance and surrender, like a subtle current beneath a still river. He moved among the horses and cattle without effort, yet in every action there was an unspoken care, a careful attention that somehow included her in its quiet orbit. Even from across the yard, she sensed the rhythm of him, a combination of strength and restraint, and it made her pulse stir, made her stomach tighten with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. When he approached her, stepping through the soft dust, the heat of the afternoon sun casting long shadows across his face, there was no need for words. The briefest touch of his hand on the railing as he passed close to her, the weight of his gaze holding her in place for a fraction longer than necessary, was enough to awaken memories and desires she had kept in check for too long. Evelyn realized that this was not a love announced by words or grand gestures, but something far subtler, an intimacy born of shared space, of proximity, of trust and attention given freely, yet unspoken. Every small interaction carried a charge, a gentle electricity that threaded through her body and made her aware of each breath, each step, each heartbeat. She felt drawn into a slow dance of attention and reaction, her own motions measured and cautious, yet increasingly compelled by the unspoken language Thomas offered in glances, in posture, in the careful way he navigated the land and the people around him. As the day wore on and the sun slanted lower toward the horizon, casting a golden haze over the ranch, Evelyn noticed the way he moved between tasks with fluid precision, never forced, never hurried, yet always present, always observing, always aware. The simple act of being near him stirred something in her, a longing she had not expected, a reminder that even amid ruin and toil, connection could be found in the subtle brush of hand against shoulder, the faint warmth of proximity, the quiet assurance of presence. The ranch, harsh and unyielding under the sun, seemed to soften under the weight of his calm, steady energy, and Evelyn felt a spark of something she could not yet name, a tether between them that promised both comfort and tension, desire and restraint, intimacy and space. The heat of the afternoon, the rustle of wind through dry grass, the scent of horses and dust, the steady rhythm of his work, all combined to pull at her in a way she had not anticipated, stirring curiosity, tension, and an undeniable attraction. And in that silent, sun-drenched expanse of the ranch, Evelyn realized that the journey she had begun by returning home was no longer only about reclaiming the past, but about discovering the present, and perhaps a future she had long thought impossible. The work on the ranch unfolded like a quiet, deliberate rhythm, each task a step in a dance neither had rehearsed, but both instinctively understood. Evelyn bent to lift a crate filled with feed, her fingers gripping the rough wood as she straightened, and Thomas appeared beside her, catching the edge before it wobbled, his hands steady and sure. The brief contact sent a pulse through her that had nothing to do with the weight of the load. They moved along the fence line together, repairing broken boards, hammering nails, their motions synchronized without conscious planning, as if the rhythm of labor itself drew them into unspoken harmony. Sweat ran down Evelyn's back, and the dust clung to her hair, yet she felt a strange warmth in each glance he offered, a quiet acknowledgement of effort shared and understood. When she stepped to water the fields, Thomas followed, adjusting the hose, guiding it past her without speaking, the heat of his presence brushing her shoulder in a way that made her stomach tighten. Small gestures, the shift of his hand to steady a gate, the way he handed her tools without breaking stride, became charged with meaning she could not name, moments of intimacy wrapped in ordinary action. They worked side by side, hauling hay, fixing gates, tending to the livestock, and in each shared breath, Evelyn felt herself drawn closer, attuned to the subtle currents between them. The sun lowered in the sky, casting long shadows across the parched earth, and the golden light caught in his hair and on his skin, illuminating the lines of his movements with an almost magnetic pull. She noticed the way his gaze lingered for just a heartbeat longer than necessary when she reached for something, the tilt of his head as he studied the way she handled the work, and the light, almost imperceptible brush of fingers when passing tools, each instance pulling her into a deeper awareness of him. There was no urgency, no grand declaration, only the slow, persistent building of tension through proximity, touch, and mutual reliance. As they paused to lift a particularly heavy bale, their shoulders pressed together for a moment, and the heat of the contact lingered, echoing in Evelyn's chest long after they parted. Every motion became an unspoken conversation, a back and forth of effort and awareness that created a quiet, tantalizing intimacy, a tension that felt both comforting and dangerously enticing. By the time they finished the day's labor, the air hung heavy with dust and sweat, the sun dipping low behind the distant hills. Yet the most noticeable weight was the pull between them, the unspoken connection that had been forged through the shared work, each task leaving traces of longing and trust that neither could ignore. Evelyn felt it in the way her heartbeat quickened when he came near, in the way she sought his glance even when it was unnecessary, and in the subtle thrill of knowing he watched, he noticed, and he responded in kind. In these ordinary chores, in the rhythm of labor and the brush of proximity, a bond was forming, slow and insistent, one that promised more than either had yet dared to name, a quiet, simmering intimacy that pulled her forward with every step, every breath, every shared effort. The evening settled over the ranch with a slow, deliberate hush, the air warm from the day's sun and heavy with the scent of hay and dust. Evelyn moved through the yard with careful steps, each one measured, yet her mind raced with thoughts she could not name aloud. Thomas lingered nearby, tending to the horses, his hand steady and sure. Yet even in his silence there was a presence that pressed softly against her consciousness. The quiet was not empty, it was charged with everything unspoken, a tension that made the air thick and expectant. She found herself watching him, noticing the way the last light caught the angles of his face, the slight arch of his brow as he focused, and the subtle grace in the movements of his shoulders and arms. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in muted golds and fading pinks, and the shadows of the barns stretched long and thin across the ground. Evelyn paused by the fence, tracing the grain of the worn wood with her fingertips, feeling the rough texture against her palms, a grounding sensation as her chest tightened with unacknowledged longing. Thomas approached, his steps quiet but deliberate, and when he stopped nearby, the space between them became almost tangible. She felt the brush of air as he moved, a closeness that was not forced but inevitable, a gravitational pull she could not resist. For a moment, the world seemed to contract, the sounds of the ranch fading until only their breathing and the soft creak of boards beneath their feet existed. There was a rhythm to the silence, a cadence that drew her attention inward, to the fluttering in her chest and the warmth spraying slowly from her shoulders downward. In that stillness, she recognized the truth she had tried to ignore. She had wanted this quiet connection for longer than she could admit, and the gentle nearness of Thomas was more potent than words, more powerful than any promise or declaration. Every glance, every subtle shift of weight, every incidental brush of fingers as he handed her tools or adjusted a harness became an affirmation she could feel deep in her bones. She realized that the bond forming between them was not about grand gestures or rushed confessions, but about presence, about recognition and trust built in the silent spaces of shared work and mutual care. The dusk deepened, shadows merging with the soft glow of lanterns flickering inside the barn, and Evelyn felt a surrender in that quiet, a willingness to let herself be seen, to let herself feel. There was a fragile exhilaration in admitting, even only to herself, that she was no longer guarding against the possibility of desire or connection. Thomas remained near, aware without speaking, his steady proximity a quiet promise, and in that moment, Evelyn allowed herself to hope. The silence held them together, a delicate tether of mutual understanding and attraction, a space in which the heart could speak, even when the mouth remained still. Every passing minute strengthened the unspoken truth, the magnetic tension that pulled them closer, not through words, but through awareness, presence, and the intimate acknowledgement of what they had both begun to feel. The sky darkened, stars faintly emerging, and the world seemed to pause around them, leaving only the resonance of possibility, the quiet ignition of emotions long restrained, and the soft, persistent beat of hearts learning to trust once more. The sky had darkened to a deep indigo, and a low wind swept across the fields of the ranch, carrying with it the scent of wet earth and the first drops of rain. Evelyn stood at the edge of the overgrown pasture, her hands pressed against the wooden fence, feeling the rough splinters bite into her skin, a reminder of all she had built and nurtured here. The news of the sale had arrived like a sudden storm, overturning the fragile calm she had begun to trust, and with it came the ghosts of past losses, of years spent struggling alone to hold on to a life that seemed always just out of reach. Each memory pressed against her chest, tightening her breath, yet within that pressure stirred a resolve she had not felt in years. She would not surrender without a fight. Thomas moved quietly beside her, his presence steady, unspoken support radiating in the way he held himself near her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his shoulder, the slow, reassuring rhythm of his breathing. The rain began to fall in heavier streams, splattering across the grass and puddling at their feet, and Evelyn felt the cold bite of water soak through her sleeves. Yet with Thomas beside her, the chill seemed less sharp, as if his quiet strength formed a shield around her,
anchoring her in the moment, reminding her she did not face this alone. The tension was thick, almost tactile, in the charged air between them, each glance and slight touch igniting sparks that had long lain dormant in her chest.
They moved through the fields together, navigating the muddy paths and broken fences, each step a reminder of the work that still needed to be done, both on the land and within their hearts. Evelyn felt her pulse quicken when Thomas lifted a fallen board, brushing against her arm as he handed it over, his fingers lingering just a moment longer than necessary. That small, silent interaction held more weight than words could convey, a promise and a challenge wrapped into one. Every moment spent side by side strengthened the bond that had begun quietly and now demanded recognition, the closeness forcing Evelyn to confront desires she had buried beneath years of caution and self-reliance. As night fell, the rain softened into a gentle drizzle, and the river that bordered the property swelled with the downpour, rushing with an urgent, almost alive sound. Evelyn and Thomas paused at the water's edge, their hands brushing and then locking together in a silent agreement, an anchor in the swirling uncertainty around them. The tension of the possible loss of the ranch mirrored the tension in their hearts, the fear of losing not just a home, but the fragile connection that had grown between them, delicate yet undeniable. She felt the pull of longing and trust, intertwined with the anxiety that the next moment could undo everything. Lightning flashed in the distance, illuminating the sweeping landscape of tall grasses and scattered trees, casting shadows that danced and flickered across their faces. Evelyn looked up, feeling the storm press against her skin and lungs, but Thomas's hand in hers was steady, grounding her as the wind swept through their hair, and the scent of wet earth mingled with the warmth that seemed to radiate between them. In that shared silence, so full of anticipation and unspoken emotion, Evelyn realized that fighting to save the ranch was no longer only about land or legacy. It was about preserving the fragile hope of connection, the warmth of a trust that had been tested and survived, and the possibility of love that could flourish even amidst uncertainty. The rain fell harder now, streaking across the sky and washing the past into the soil beneath their feet, and Evelyn felt a swell of determination rise within her. She tightened her grip on Thomas's hand, feeling the quiet power in his steadiness, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe that they could endure, that they could keep the ranch, and that they could preserve this new, tender bond that had emerged from hardship. Every heartbeat, every glance, every shared breath became part of the storm, an intimate dance of fear and hope, desire and resolve. In the quiet tension of a rain-soaked evening, Evelyn understood that love and courage were inseparable here, that holding on to one meant embracing the other, and that together they might withstand any tempest the world could throw at them. The morning sun rose over the Colorado hills, casting a soft, golden light across the fields that stretched around the ranch. The earth smelled of rain and new growth, and every corner of the property seemed to sigh in relief, as if the land itself celebrated its salvation. Evelyn moved among the fences and pastures with a sense of calm she had not known in years. Each step she took was lighter, freer, as though the weight of loss had finally lifted, replaced by something steady and enduring. The ranch remained solid and resilient, mirroring the slow reconstruction of her own heart. Thomas worked quietly beside her, their movements synchronized not by instruction, but by instinct and familiarity. He adjusted a gate while she gathered tools, his presence constant yet unobtrusive, a steady current that anchored her in the moment. Every glance they shared carried a private language, a recognition of what had been endured
and what was now possible. The tension that had once sharpened their awareness of one another had softened into warmth, a gentle hum beneath the rhythm of their labor. In the evenings, the two would walk along the river that bordered the property, the water reflecting the orange and rose hues of the setting sun. Evelyn felt the breeze on her face and the warmth of Thomas's hand slipping into hers, fingers intertwining effortlessly, each touch a quiet testament to trust and care. The river's gentle murmur became the soundtrack to their new understanding, a reminder that life could be both calm and alive, unpredictable, yet safe in shared company. The romance between them grew through these small, deliberate gestures, shared glances, the brush of hands, the comfort of silent presence, rather than any dramatic declarations. Nights on the porch brought long hours of quiet companionship. Evelyn would watch the stars emerge one by one, while Thomas worked on simple repairs or sat beside her, letting the night wrap around them. In those moments, the weight of the past seemed distant, and the future opened like the horizon, wide and inviting. Each day became a canvas for rebuilding, not just the ranch, but a life that allowed love to be patient, tender, and resilient. The golden sunset over the river became a recurring image in her mind, a visual bookmark of this new chapter. Their silhouettes merged with the fading light, hands clasped, shoulders brushing, hearts attuned to the same rhythm. Every reflection in the water seemed to echo a promise that they had weathered storms, and now, side by side, they could face whatever lay ahead. The land was not perfect, the ranch not without its work, but in this imperfect beauty, Evelyn discovered a sense of belonging and hope she had not dared imagine. Even as the story reached this point of quiet triumph, the narrative left room for curiosity and longing. There were still challenges, still moments that would test patience and courage, but the foundation had shifted. Love was no longer a distant, elusive possibility, but a present, tangible force, grounded in trust and shared endurance. Each sunset, each gentle touch, each step along the river whispered of a life reclaimed, a heart restored, and a bond strengthened by experience and mutual respect. Evelyn understood that happiness was not a sudden gift, but a path forged with persistence, care, and quiet devotion, and that journey was only beginning. If you cherish stories of slow burning love, trust rebuilt, and lives mending after loss, follow Dust and Devotion Tales, where every tale begins with the whisper of the wind and ends in hope.